We are very, very happy and proud to be able to say that we created the opportunity for Peter Straughan and Sir Christopher Hampton to meet, because they had never met before. And we thought that maybe you should be reminded, and he would deserve a tribute. And before calling him, I will propose to you to have a tribute of all he's done, or not all, a lot of the things he's done. So here is the tribute.
It's beyond my control.
It's that woman, isn't it?
You're quite right. I have been deceiving you with Emily, among others. It's beyond my control.
Why are you doing this?
There's a woman, not Emily, another woman. A woman I adore. And I'm afraid she's insisting that I give you up. It's beyond my control.
And the Oscar goes to Christopher Hampton for Dangerous Liaison.
Well, this is great, but anyone would fly across the Atlantic to get a kiss from Michelle Pfeiffer.
My first name is Dora.
I see.
You know as well as I do, it's a sickness with Carrington. Girl of that age, still a virgin.
I was still a virgin at her age.
So was I. Is there to be no progress?
Dear Cecilia, you'd be forgiven for thinking me mad. The truth is, I feel rather lightheaded and foolish in your presence, and I don't think I can blame the heat.
Righty!
Do you think you could do me a favour? Run ahead and give this to C.
Good heavens, you're blushing.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Jung. I admitted you yesterday.
I'm not mad, you know.
Let me explain what I have in mind. I propose that we meet here, most days, to talk for an hour or two.
Talk?
Yes, just talk.
I don't know, Lil, what have we done? Crossed a line. It can't happen again.
No, I suppose it can't.
No, of course it can't.
What about you? What did you do for a living?
Oh, I was a dancer.
Were you?
Yes.
Dad?
What?
You're an engineer.
What do you know about it? Yes, tap dancing was my specialty.
Really?
You seem surprised.
Yeah, a little bit.
Why, don't you believe me, or you find that difficult to imagine?
Of course, it's just I've always loved tap dancing.
All of the nominees for Best Adapted Screenplay are phenomenal. Here we go. And the Oscar goes to Christopher Hampton and Florian Zeller, the father.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a great joy. It's such a great honor. And I share these joys and this award with Christopher Hampton. We have worked together for years, and I want to thank him for being such a great writer and such a wonderful friend.
So, Christopher Hampton, we are very happy to welcome you. And if we see all the filmography, what you made, all your movies, I think there's something that seems to interest you more than anything else. And I would say it's the complexity and depth of relationships. Is it something you focus on, or is it for casualty?
I don't know. I try to make everything that I write different from anything else I've written before, but I guess in the end it's inevitable that certain patterns emerge, and I think I've always been interested in the difficulties people have with one another, and the way people treat one another, you know, through all the films, there's an interest in
describing
strong feelings, yeah,
between people. That's what we feel in the movies we've seen that you have written. So we have decided that we will ask him this first question, and before welcoming Peter Straughan and having a conversation, the three of us, the two of them rather, we will offer a tribute to Peter Straughan.
Do you know the meaning of cholera?
The curry.
It's only too easy to catch people's attention by doing something worse than anyone else has dared do it before. Who are you thinking of here? Yourself or Vincent?
Which leg did you write?
This one.
Ow! God! Fuck! God!
Einstein said, try not to become a man of success, rather become a man of God.
It's the Anya chakra, the third eye, the symbol of the Jedi. I saw that you were drawing it. Well, the universe gives you clues like that, you don't ignore it.
Das Canton. It's a ghost station. West Berlin trains pass through the station on this track.
I'm terrified.
But you're doing it anyway because you know how important it is.
If I had waited for you, if you had come, would it be different?
We can't go back.
I wish I could have done more, Control.
You did all you could, Percy.
Look, the Minister's very pleased with your progress so far.
He's less pleased with the lack of progress with our American cousins. You see, in their eyes, you're still a leaky ship.
What did he say?
Think of your wife.
No longer idealistic?
You know, you need to be idealistic to get into this thing, to keep going, but...
Baby, baby, you know it's true. I'm a puppet just for you. I'd do any little thing you say. I wouldn't have it any other way. Take my heart and take my soul. I'm giving you complete control. If you wanna see me do my thing, baby, pull my string now. Yeah.
It's like someone said, if you don't like the road you're on, start paving another one.
I can't tell.
You never know what's going to decide your future.
It's like a movie. It's all flat, black and white.
It would be nice if it could have had color, though. Maybe if you paid more.
If Tedesco becomes Pope, he will undo 60 years of progress.
You talk as if you're the only alternative, but Adeyemi has the wind behind him.
Adeyemi. Adeyemi, the man who believes that homosexuals should be sent to prison in this world and hell in the next. Adeyemi's not the answer to anything, and you know it. If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war, and you have to commit to a side.
And the Oscar goes to Conclave, Peter Straughan.
This is the first Oscar win and second nomination for Peter Straughan. He was...
Thank you so much. Just a huge thank you to everyone involved in making Conclave. Dankeschön. And one last thing, I'm here with my daughter, Connie. Connie, I love you. This is for you.
So, Peter, after having watched your filmography, we wondered if you agree and if you were aware that most of your movies are about influence.
Or about
influence, about people who are influent and are driving other people or pushing them to do things and are taking the power. And would you say that it's something you are conscious, or you agree first? And if so, how would you?
I've never thought about that before, actually. That is quite new. I have noticed that often my films are about betrayal. And about the difference between the traitors and those that are loyal. That's something which I have seen come up time and time again. I don't know why. Maybe my Catholic roots. And I think I am interested in power as well, and the effects of power. So yeah. Okay, I'm going to give it to you. Yes.
Good. So you both had Oscar. Christopher, you had 2. Peter, you had 1. I'm interested in knowing, maybe yours is a little too recent for that question, but I'm interested in knowing if it changed something in your writing or in the way you're watching your work.
No,
I'm not speaking about having more proposition, which we can imagine, but rather about perception.
It didn't change anything in my writing. And in fact, the first one, there's a thing called the curse of the Oscar, which means that you don't get to work for years. And that's more or less what it took. It was 6 years between winning the first one and getting another film made. And then I was forced to the desperate expedient of directing it myself. So it doesn't always bring rainbows and chocolate. But it's lovely to have won it, and it does mean you get more work, actually, eventually.
And recognition, perception, people perceive you differently?
I think it's a hard thing to get away from, even if you wanted to.
Do you already experience that change, or?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I'm hoping work's not going to dry up. I'm still doing the things that I was doing before the Oscar. It's definitely a kind of easy shorthand for people. You know, you're sort of Oscar-winning screenwriter, and they don't say anything else. So
they feel more comfortable. So if they got an Oscar, I can hire them.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And in a strange sort of way, it sort of takes the pressure off a little bit, because you think, okay, I've got one now, so I'll just do whatever I want to do now.
Recognition also. Yeah. I'm going to ask only a few questions because, of course, I'm sure you have lots of questions. So I think in your 2 profiles, there is some things in common, lots of things, by the way, in common in your writing. I think you both wrote for the theatre. You wrote for theatre, but also you did a lot of adaptation. So I would like to hear you about what do you prefer, what do you feel? I know it depends on the project, but I would like to know if it changes a lot for you to accept or to go on a project for theatre or for cinema. And then the other question is about adaptation. Is it if a script from spec, or if you are adapting a novel?
Yes, it was the traditional route in England when I started out. You started out in the theatre, then you graduated to television, which at that time was still doing single plays, single films quite regularly, which it doesn't anymore. And then eventually you started to write films, or people started asking you to write films. So I think if you're French, you go a different route. You go film school and become an auteur immediately. But it's and as for the question about adaptation, it's what people tend to offer you, because they'll buy an option on a novel, and then they'll look for somebody to adapt it. So adaptations almost always come through offers from producers. Occasionally, I mean, with Atonement, for example, I liked the book so much, I tried very hard to persuade everybody that I was the right person to do it, and so and that worked. That was great. But generally speaking, you have your own projects, and then people ask you to make adaptations. I don't know if that's your.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think adaptation can become a kind of trap you can fall into as a writer, and it's a lovely trap. I love adapting. But as Christopher said, you know, you start out as a writer and you're writing original works, and then if you have any success, somebody sends you a book and says, "Would you like to do this?" And you say yes, and you do that. And when you finish that, someone offers you another book, and you say, "Okay, yes, I'll do that." And then before you know it, you're just going from book to book, and you haven't carved out the time to, you know, think of some original ideas or. I mean, as I say, it's not a bad place to be, you know, and I do love adaptation, but now I'm kind of thinking I would like to do more original pieces.
And there are, like Christopher, some books that you read and you decided to adapt without having a producer asking for it?
Yes, there was. There's a TV show I'm doing now, which we'll be shooting in December, and that was from a trilogy of books called Berlin Noir, which was a kind of, as it sounds, a sort of noir detective. But it's set in Nazi Germany. That was the sort of the central conceit, and I thought it was a great idea for a TV show. So I sort of started I found out who the producer was who had the rights and took it from there.
Mm. And when you're working, very often we see the name of the director credited to the script. I'd like to know how you like it. Do you like to collaborate with directors always, or do you don't mind? What is your position about working closely on the script with a director?
Oh, I think you want to do it. The best thing of all is when you know who the director is going to be before you start, which doesn't always often happen these days. They like to commission you to write the script, and then they start looking for a director, and eventually, you know. But I've been very lucky. I've worked with some really good directors, and I like to collaborate as closely as possible. Everybody has their different methods. There are some like Stephen Frears, who I've worked with now 5 times, who like you to be on the set and be there all the way through to the end, which is wonderful. There are other directors who prefer that the writer hands in the script and goes away immediately. And so, you know, if that's what they want, that's what they want. It's the director's medium, so you have to be flexible. But I've been lucky enough to work with some really fine directors, and also work with some wonderful directors on films which then didn't get made. But at least I had the experience of working with, you know, Fred Zinnemann or David Lean for a considerable stretch of time, and you learn when you're young, you learn enormously from working with great directors.
What about you?
The same as Christopher, my favourite situation is to be building a film from the very beginning with the director. And as Christopher says, it doesn't always happen, because usually I think producers feel like they need a script in order to attract the director, unless you already have a relationship with someone, you know. But with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the director Thomas Alfredson was attached at exactly the same time that Bridget and I were, so we got on very well and wrote the script, you know, worked on the script together. That's my favourite way of working.
What is very disconcerting is when they finally find a director for you, and you have the first meeting, and the director says, well, it's a wonderful script, but I think we should start from scratch.
Does it happen, truly?
Yeah, it happened on Atonement.
Oh, wow, yes.
I mean, and that is one of the dangers, isn't it? When a director, you know, it comes quite late in the process, because they kind of want to make it their own, so often they're going to, you know, dismantle things. Again, if you've done it from the beginning together, then you're all on the same page by the time you get there.
And did it happen to you when, in the case the director doesn't want you on set, so you're cut from the making of the movie, and did it happen to you that you found out that the result was far from what you were expecting?
No, you can't make any rules at all. I mean, on Atonement, I didn't go on the set because the first time I did, I sensed that the director was uncomfortable and would rather I wasn't there. So fine, but he shot the script that we wrote, exact word for word. So it was just his. And then there are other directors like David Cronenberg, who will invite you on the set, will be very gracious and everything, but isn't going to ever ask you for your advice or whether something should be changed or something should be different. He just because he has such a clear image of everything that he wants to do, that you're just coming to have a cup of tea as far as he's concerned.
So if you think of what you've done and of the movies that didn't get made, do you have some regrets, some things that you think, even if it hasn't been made yet, I want to have it? Like it's a pet project or?
Well, there's a script I wrote a few years ago which hasn't been made yet, which I would like to see made, which was about Shackleton. Shackleton, he was the Antarctic explorer who got stuck in the ice with all his men and managed to get them all out. And I really enjoyed working on that, so I'm hoping that one will happen someday.
Well, there was a period after, the period I referred to after Dangerous Liaison. It wasn't that I didn't get the work, it was that they didn't make the films. But I wrote a couple of quite big films in that period. One was a film about the Vietnam War called A Bright Shining Lie, from possibly the best book about the Vietnam War. And the idea was to write a film which actually tried to see things from the Vietnamese point of view, as well as the usual, which is the American point of view. And that almost got made by Warner Brothers, but for some reason you never can understand why it went away again. And then I did an adaptation of a novel by Edith Wharton called The Custom of the Country, which seemed to me in the same vein as Dangerous Liaison. It's about a woman coming to New York and behaving incredibly badly and destroying a lot of men. And that almost got made about 3 times, but in the end it didn't. So it's sadness when you write stuff that you think is good and nobody makes it. But it's part of the you have to know about that's going to happen before you start. Really, writing a movie is exactly like going into the casino.
Yeah. And I would say as well, especially with screenwriters that are kind of starting out, one of the really important things to learn to deal with is failure. For me, anyway, there's definitely been things that I've written that haven't worked at all, and it's difficult and it's hard and it's painful. And there have been times when I've thought, well, I don't know how to do this. I should stop. But I would say if this happens to any of you, when that happens to you, just continue. It is unbelievably the case that just by staying in the game, you will start to get further and further along the road. Just hang on in there.
It's very, very good for your character, failure.
That's for sure. So, and about alternatively working for theatre and for cinema, and so what would you say if you stay far from cinema, from theatre? Do you miss it? Because I know you're lately very often involved in plays. So
yes, I try and keep in touch with the theatre. For me, the theatre is a sort of more reliable companion because you write the play and they do it, and they more or less do it the way you want them to do it. And if it doesn't do well, someone else will do it. And so the theatre has this wonderful continuity about it. Whereas a movie is like a novel, when it's finished, it's finished, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't change it, you can't improve it. There it is. I like the sort of living quality of the theatre and the sort of danger of the theatre. Really, so I always try and have something either
regularly.
In the middle of writing something or else preparing a production.
What about you?
I mean, I just sort of had started in theatre when I was very young. I didn't do anything particularly interesting with it, but I find myself now thinking I might like to go back.
That's what I was wondering, yes.
Yeah, no, I think I would like to try again. And then with TV, I mean, it's such a dominant kind of medium now, that it's hard not to do some TV work, is the truth. And I find it sort of attractive in some ways. I like that challenge of the long form story and the time you have to develop quite complex narratives potentially. But it's also very frustrating. It takes so much longer, and like years can go by developing, TV series. And then, as Christopher was saying, if that doesn't happen, you just feel like all that wasted time piled up behind you. So I think, on the whole, my heart always belongs with film, and that's the medium I love best.
The reputation of a screenwriter in UK is very, very good, at least in France. I'm not sure about Switzerland, but in France we do consider a British writer as much better than a French writer, because the TV shows are also very interesting. So would you say you see a difference? Because when working with French, you've been working with French directors a lot. So what would you say is the difference between the two?
I think that the culture which encourages you to when you've written a script, then direct it, means that there are a certain number of films that inevitably get made where the direction is not as good as the writing, or the writing is not as good as the direction, because they are two completely separate things, and you aren't necessarily going to be good at both of them. And so I mean, it may be different now, but when I started out in England, we were absolutely not encouraged to imagine that we could direct. We were on that side of the fence. We were the writers. And one of the encouraging things of the last 50 years or so is how the writer goes slowly up the credits until now. We're next after the director now,
which is great.
And it means that I think people now recognise that writing scripts is probably the most difficult part of the whole exercise, more difficult than directing, in my humble opinion.
That's also the opinion of Stephen Frears. That's what he says.
Yes.
What about you?
I mean, I would agree with what Christopher says. I don't know French theatre well enough, but I always sort of feel that the fact that Britain has such a very strong theatre tradition in which writing is king. That's been a kind of laboratory that a lot of great talent has come out of. It's a sort of great training ground, and maybe gives you the sense of the importance of a writer if you're a British writer.
And thinking of working with the United States, because it's more, obviously more industrial, or at least that's what we perceive here. It must be very different than working with, I don't know, Anne Fontaine or even Florian Zeller. Or what is your perception as a writer? How are you considered by United States? Not by all United States, but by the people you've been working with.
Well, you never have a bad meeting in America. I mean, everyone's always so extremely kind and polite and assiduous in saying how much they enjoy your being there and all the rest of it. But the fact of the matter is, it's very ruthless environment, and people fall by the wayside much more regularly than they do on a European project. So you can open the paper and find that somebody else is writing the film you thought you were writing, and it's you have to get used to that as well, and hope that you can. But the fact of the matter is, I was thinking the other day, I have 19 films made. I've had 19 films made, and I've never worked with an American director. And very few. Some of those films are American films, but it's always been with. I've always worked with a European director, and I think there is a huge chasm of sensibility between Europe and America as far as making films is concerned, and I guess I'm on this side.
The same. I feel the same way. It's what you said, Pascal. It always feels like a slightly more industrial process, slightly more committee built. There's almost an inverse kind of ratio, between budget size and the quality of the work. Sometimes it feels, and they've probably, on the whole, been my less happy experiences have been with the big American films.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and I think it covers it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be talking the whole time, so I want to ask if people have questions. Yes?
Can I ask 3 questions?
Okay.
Is it not too much, right? Okay.
It depends. Okay.
Just opening my notes.
Oh, wow.
Okay. No, just okay. First of all, it's an absolute pleasure. My heart is buzzing to be just sitting in front of you and learning from your vast experiences. First of all, just as a writer who's still starting his career and looking at both of your incredible portfolios, just I want to know, how do you manage to basically maintain productivity? Okay. And it's a different case before you have an agent or you're commissioned by production company or you're in talks with the director than when you're still starting, but you still need to maintain productivity while having other stuff going on in your life. And I've heard from one of my screenwriting mentors that the fear of an empty or a blank page never goes. So I would like to learn from you how you manage to maintain productivity, or if there is an advice you'd like to give to aspiring writers. So that's the first question.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I was waiting for the second one. Perseverance, I think, is what you is the most important quality. You will get a lot of disappointments and a lot of, there's a lot of black stretches when things are not going right, and when you feel that projects that you really cherish and have spent a year writing or whatever it is are not going to go ahead. That's awful. But you just have to keep going, and productivity comes from practice, really. I mean, I think I only had one when I was about 30. I suddenly had a moment of panic when I didn't know what to do for about 6 months. I didn't work for about 6 months. But touch wood, that hasn't happened again since. It's absolutely terrifying when it does happen.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I think I've become aware that in order to maintain, good work, you need to keep an eye on how much is going out and what's coming in, and it's something that I try and prioritize a little more now, to make sure that I'm reading, to make sure that I'm watching, good cinema or good television, or maybe music, or also having time to be living and not just writing, because it can easily just tip into, and at times sometimes it's unavoidable. Again, especially with television, I think, where you're just working all the time, it's just going out all the time, and you can then feel that the battery's getting low, the tank's getting empty, and it's really important to replenish it with good art, I think.
Thank you so much. My second question is a bit technical, and I know that now, due to your experience, I would say that writing comes from, it flows organically, but if at any point in your lives, or even now, do you have a certain structural method? Like when you approach a story, does it start from a certain character? Does it start with how paradigms? Do they mean anything to you? Structures, all of the things that we learn at film schools. Because I know by time it changes. You don't have to look at any of that, and you just allow yourself to float freely. So if you have anything to say about technicalities and method, and if each of you have a certain method when it comes to approaching a story.
I think you're right. I remember when I started out, I was reading those books. I read Sid Field's and, the kind of the how-to manuals, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And in some ways it can give you a kind of confidence, because you feel like you've learned some rules and there's some scaffolding there in place, so you know what you're doing. But the more you work, I think the more it becomes instinctive. And to the extent that if I try and stop now and think why I'm making certain choices, it's like trying to work out how you're riding a bike. While you're riding a bike, I tend to sort of stumble and fall. And in terms of any sort of structural techniques, I find that it very much varies. And again, it's a slightly instinctive choice, but I have different methods with different projects. So with some of them, I do no planning, I do no outline, I'll just start writing, particularly if it's an adaptation of a book. Conclave, there was no outlining, there was no planning, I just started, adapting. Tinker Tailor, which was from quite a complex book, and which we knew we were going to take apart and put together in a very different way, that we actually did the kind of old-fashioned cork board with index cards, one for each scene, and then you'd keep rearranging, trying to work out what's the right shape. So yeah, each sort of project comes with its own methodology, I think, for me.
Yeah, I think the only general thing I would say is that I tend to spend more time preparing the script than actually writing it. So there's quite a long period of reflection and notes and so on, and the things, for me, the thing slowly comes together as you reflect on it. And once you're in that is true of structural considerations as well. You're thinking about how the film is going to be built, and then for me there comes just a certain moment when I'm ready, and then I try and write it as fast as I possibly can, because my superstition is that the energy you put into writing it somehow filters right through to the end of the process.
Mm.
Thank you so much. My final question, and then I'm leaving the mic to the rest of the audience.
And each one has 3 questions.
Yeah. Okay, since Sir Christopher mentioned that it is a director's medium, and everybody knows it is a director's medium, so I would like to understand, because there would be moments, I assume, of colliding egos on the table, the writer versus the director. How would you manage that, especially if you've spent time developing your own story, your own vision of the story, and then there's director attached, and somehow you would feel undermined? I would love to know if it has ever happened, and would that change your relationship to the story, and would you manage to still feel a sense of ownership when there is some sort of a decision-making person that would possibly take it to a direction that you haven't really imagined while you wrote the first draft?
If you're a writer, I don't think you can afford an ego. It's just not. You've got to adapt to whoever you're working with, and really use the arts of persuasion. You become a kind of diplomat, and you try to point out as clearly as possible why this is a bad idea and what you're suggesting is a good idea. And sometimes it just doesn't work. But generally speaking, if you spend enough time talking about a project with a director, and he or she is a good director, then it resolves itself. But I've been lucky because obviously 2 or 3 of the films were not made exactly as I had envisaged. But on the whole, I managed to fight my corner, and you have to. It is a sort of fight. It's a collaboration and a struggle, and what comes out of the other end is it largely depends on the quality of the people struggling and collaborating.
Yeah. I'm a little brother. I've got an older brother, and I think I'm quite comfortable in the role of the younger brother in the relationship. I'm quite comfortable with the role of feeling like you're there to support and to some extent serve the director. And that works really well when you're working with a good director. When you're working with someone who you feel is the real talent of the team. And when you feel challenged and inspired to go further and work harder and not to be, there are just moments sometimes where you thought, oh, that's a good idea, and then a really good director will challenge it and say, no, let's do it completely differently, and then that's really exciting and sort of empowering. I have had experiences where I'm trying to give the director what they want, but I fundamentally don't agree with it or believe in it, and that's miserable, to be honest. And I think I've been, and maybe this is an important lesson, although so many of you write to directors, it's not going to matter to you, but it's maybe an important lesson. I think earlier in my career, I would just do what the director wanted, even if I didn't think it was right. And I think I'm much more inclined now to fight my corner, or to walk from the project, because it doesn't do them any good, and it doesn't do you any good if you want to make different kind of films.
Okay, we do have questions in French as well. Pascal, is it okay if you translate them?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Bonjour. J'aurais une question sur le développement du scénario. Quand vous commencez à écrire, est-ce que vous avez déjà une idée de la musique qui irait avec? On sent l'importance dans chaque film de la musique. Est-ce qu'elle vient après, ou est-ce que vous avez déjà une idée de la musique que vous allez mettre?
The question is that when you begin to write a script, at the moment of development, are you already thinking of the music that's going to go with your script, or is it the director, or is it another thing? Does it happen that you're choosing the music in the beginning?
Music's very, very important for me in terms of film, in terms of writing the film. So I do often put music in the script, but I have to say with very little expectation that will end up being the music in the film. And I don't say that bitterly, it's just, it's too early, you can't really tell until the edit what would be right or not. But I think it's worth doing, because I think it's a kind of shorthand for the director sometimes to say, I had this kind of mood in mind, or I had this energy in mind. So I don't think it's wasted, even if they, take no notice of it. But the other thing is I listen to music when I'm writing, always. And I always have since I started. And I think it's partly a sort of firewall that it cuts the world out, and it helps me, go into the world of the script. And also one last thing, which is quite strange, but Thomas Alfredson, the director, I found out did exactly the same thing. When I'm working on a project, often there'll be one piece of music that I come to associate with the project. And if I'm stuck, or if I'm not sure what I should be doing next, if I go away and listen to that piece of music, sometimes it helps. So sometimes I'll have that piece of music just on a loop, constantly playing. And the strange thing is, the music, it's very mysterious why one piece of music links to the project. It's never obvious. It's never a piece of music that would end up being on the soundtrack, So I did a TV series called Wolf Hall, which is set in Tudor England in the court of Henry VIII. And the piece of music that I was always listening to when I was writing that was from Pina, the documentary about the choreographer, and it was kind of a Latin American dance piece. So I don't know why that was in my head connected to Wolf Hall, But yeah, so yes, very important for me.
Yes, it is. It is very important, but you don't often have as a writer, the luxury of knowing what's going to develop with the music. When you do, it's wonderful. I mean, when we were doing Dangerous Liaison, I knew that the composer was going to be a man called George Fenton, who I already knew and had worked with Stephen a lot. And before I started writing, we spent a considerable amount of time going through the music of the time and picking pieces of music that would because the plan was that we would have a number of pieces of classical music from the period, but also Stephen wanted a kind of a Hitchcock thrillery kind of music as well, so that the music goes between this quite urgent sort of Hitchcock-inspired music and Bach and Handel and Vivaldi and Gluck and all the music that we found, and so that was marvelous and there are musical sequences in the film which of course had to be planned, in the opera house or in concerts at people's homes, or and all of that had to be built into the screenplay, and it was great to be able to do that and to know what the score was going to sound like before you started. But normally speaking, the composer is the last person on, and it's an incredibly stressful profession, I think, because they're given a film and they're given 3 or 4 weeks to write a score. And how they do it, I really don't. It needs a kind of iron constitution to be, and they have to fit, of course, as it goes without saying, they have to fit the pieces of music precisely to the length of the sequences, the edited sequences. So it's I'm full of admiration for composers. When I directed a film based on Conrad's Secret Agent, and I asked Philip Glass to do the music, and he did it. But of course, I was fiddling about with the film in the editing room, and he was doing a huge concert tour of America. And so I'd ring him up. He'd be in his hotel room in Cincinnati, about to go off for that evening's concert. And he would write precisely 1 minute and 3 seconds of music to go on this particular, and it would be faxed overnight. I was lost in admiration. It would be precisely right, almost always.
Yes, you were talking about the very difficult relationship sometimes between the director and the screenwriter, and I can imagine that sometimes it's also the case with the actors too. I was wondering how it happens from a legal point of view. If you really can't recognize yourself in the result at the end, is there a possibility for you to have your name not associated with the movie at the end, or who has the last word finally?
You can, and I sometimes wish that I had. You can take your name off a project, yeah.
Yes, you can, and in fact, I have.
There you go. Better.
Name, please.
No, I'm trying to remember actually, but I know that I did take my name off something, and of course, you don't get the what are they called, the residuals.
Yes.
You don't get income from the film later down the line, and so there's a choice to be made. But sometimes it doesn't seem, it doesn't seem worth having your name attached to a film that doesn't resemble whatever it was that you had in your head to start with. So better to take your name off it.
Good night. I have a question. If you can talk about your method, if you have one, for adaptation. What's your approach?
Well, I think the rule is, the better the book, the closer you stay to it. If you're adapting a not very good book, you can do what you like. If you're adapting a masterpiece, like Les Liaisons Dangereuses, or even Atonement is, I think it is a masterpiece, you're very well advised to stick as close to the text as original text as possible. So that's my rule. Learned, I think, originally from Harold Pinter, who used to adapt a lot, and was probably the greatest adapter of novels that ever worked in film. And that was his rule. If you're doing the go-between, make it exactly like this exquisite novel that you're adapting. If you're doing the Quiller Memorandum, anything goes. So I think that's kind of the rule. As far as method is concerned, I like to break down, to summarize the whole novel on one side of the page, and then on the other side just start writing things that occur to me as I'm doing that exercise, and I find that very, very useful way to jump in to begin work on an adaptation.
I think probably my advice would be, particularly if it's a big. I mean, generally a film is a work of boiling down a novel. Usually things are going to have to be shrunk down and a sort of a leaner version found. So I usually think it's important, and again, this may be just instinctive anyway, but it's important to find the spine of the story that you're going to tell, particularly if it's a big book. So with Wolf Hall, even though it was going to be 6 hours of television, it was a huge book, you know, with a lot of characters and a lot of storylines. So I had to sort of decide, but what's the one story that I'm connecting with emotionally, and make that the spine, which in my case inevitably was again about betrayal. I don't know why, but it was. So I kind of think it's good to do that. Find the spine, because that'll help you make all those thousands of little decisions you're going to have to make in the adaptation process about, you know, that piece or that piece there, or that piece there, or that line there, or that line there. So I find that useful. And just in terms of practical sort of how I go about it, I mean, I literally I would read the book once with a highlighter and just, again, instinctively highlight anything that catches my eye. And then I'll go through that process again. And usually, if there are sections then which haven't been highlighted at all, they're probably not going to end up in the script. They may be unadaptable. You know, they're things that you can't make a scene out of, or they feel like a repetition or whatever. So that would be the starting point for me.
There's an interesting thing about dialogue, that some novelists are very good at dialogue, but a lot of them aren't. And so if you adapt, let's say, a book by Joseph Conrad, who of course a great genius, but he couldn't write dialogue for anything. So you have to do that for him. Other writers write, you know, brilliant dialogue. But you always have, it's not a question of just copying it out, because each scene will have its own rhythm, and you'll have to take the essence of the scene in the novel, and I very rarely find I'm using the same line as is there in the novel.
No, that's true. And again, I think usually it's about boiling down. John le Carré actually said that the screenplay is to the novel what an OXO cube is to a cow. It was a little dismissive, but it captures. You know, I think you are trying to capture the essence of a book in a much more compact form. So there's some truth in that. But yes, I definitely agree that dialogue is usually one of the areas where there's going to be variance. And the other thing that's interesting is you have to sort of develop a ventriloquist's ear, because there will probably be moments where you're going to have a character say something that isn't from the book, and it needs to feel as if the author had written that line. So you start to kind of, you know, think you need to work out how you can do John le Carré dialogue, or Hilary Mantel dialogue, or God forbid Joseph Conrad dialogue.
My question is to Sir Christopher Hampton. You mentioned that you received lessons from David Lean, and I was curious to know what they would be. And the second question would be, are there any screenwriters that inspired you, and why?
Well, with David Lean, I was hired to adapt Joseph Conrad's novel Nostromo, and it was very daunting and quite a ride, really. He was about 80. But in the you know, tremendously vital and healthy, and he was also a very impatient man. So I went and talked through my ideas in the first week, and then, you know, we had a sort of roughly agreed outline, and he told me to go away and write it, and which I did. And he would ring up every week and say, "How's it going? What page are you on? Where?" And I had a first draft done in about 6 weeks, because it was driving me crazy. And then the real work began, which was that for the next 9 months, really, every day I would go to his office and we would take a scene, and he was always interested in the visual aspects of the scene. He was always interested in how the scene related to the scene before and the scene after. And he had a whole battery of people already on the film who were already working for him. So he would bring in his property master to discuss, you know, he would bring in his lighting cameraman to say, how are you going to light this scene? The principal scene in Nostromo, it takes place in pitch darkness, and it's a boat full of silver which is being stolen, and going across this very placid sea. And so, you know, we had a whole session which lasted 3 days about how to light this scene. The cameraman talked to the cameraman was the great John Alcott, who had lit Barry Lyndon, and he had an idea about the stars and the tropical sky at night, and how I had read somewhere in a book that phosphorescence, there was in South American waters, phosphorescence was very so I thought that the sea could light. And then David Lean himself had the idea that the completely unrealistic, that the characters should be lit from below by the glow of the silver. It's a fantastic idea, but the point I'm trying to make is that going in there every day and working with him every day, it taught me an enormous amount about. It made me think about writing screenplays in a way I'd never, in more detail than I'd ever thought about before. So I learned that you need to think about every single image and picture it in your own head and be able to justify every single detail of every single scene. And the film could have been made, but he was so touchy, David Lean, that when Warner Brothers said they would put up half the budget, it's an enormous budget, they would put up half the budget and the Japanese would put up the other half. Great. For a few days, it was fantastic. And then I went in one day and he said, oh, by the way, I rang Warner Brothers, told them to bugger off. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, if they don't want to pay 100%, if they don't want to pay the whole film, they don't deserve it.
And that was that?
That was that for Warner Brothers. And it went on for, I mean, I left the film. By no coincidence, the next screenplay I wrote was Dangerous Liaison, into which I put everything I'd learned in the previous year. But there were 5 more years of him trying to raise the money from elsewhere and from other. And finally, Sony agreed to put up the money, much smaller, not such a big budget. And they built the sets and everything was ready to go. And he died. He had cancer and he died within 6 weeks.
Wow.
And it was just, you know, people had been cast, the whole thing was ready to go. And it's really a lesson about the necessity of some degree of compromise in making films. You can't just say, I told Warner Brothers to bugger off, because they will. And then where are you? So you have to, you know, advance, I think, with a little bit more circumspection than that. But I kind of course, it was great sadness that this film was not made. But I kind of think it was absolutely worth the time for me. It was like, I didn't go to film school. I went to David Lean. And, you know, I was therefore very, very lucky.
Hello.
Okay.
So my question is about when you get a new project, is there something that makes you say, I want to take on this project? Or inversely, a deal breaker, like that's not a project that will work, or that doesn't interest me? So what makes a project you want to work with or a good project for you?
Well, for me, if it's about betrayal in some way, then it turns out. I don't know. It's usually some sort of combination of people you want to work with, perhaps a director or actor that you admire that's maybe already attached, or if it's an adaptation, it's just about the book and your relationship with the book or play or whatever it is that you're adapting. And it's very, very instinctive, really.
Yeah, that's the word. For me, it is purely instinct. I have to feel. I don't know. You can't legislate it, and you react positively to the most unlikely things. and you react negatively to things that ought to be right up your street. But somewhere in there is a kind of something that says, yes, this is good. This would be good for me, and I can do it well. Or, attention.
I think we're running out of time. Maybe one question more. Yes. Because I'm also thinking of our translators, that it's a lot of work.
Okay. Pascal told us that, Christopher, the question is for you. My name is Jean-François. I was just wondering, Pascal told us that you have been working with Plume and Pellicule for 10 years. I wanted to know about your experience with the writers. Have you seen an evolution in those 10 years? What would you say about their way to apprehend, let's say, cinema and the writing?
Yeah, I don't really think of it as an evolution. It kind of does that a bit, because it depends on the quality of the participants, and some years are more interesting than others. When I started out, I used to work harder, and I used to read more scripts, and I used to. Now I'm going to say I'm lazy, but I'm not. I just don't have the time to read all the scripts. But I do like to talk to the writers about what their perception of the week has been, and I do believe that it's an incredibly valuable resource that you have here for people at the beginning of their careers, because the chance to really think deeply about whatever it is you're doing. Otherwise, it's such a solitary occupation. It is incredibly valuable. So really, the most important thing about DreamAgo is the people are there and talking to each other and thinking about film and thinking about how to develop themselves and their own work. And so I'm always very happy to come back whenever I can.
I have a question. Where did your love from writing come from, and what has it brought to your life?
Where did your love of writing come from?
I had it when I was very young. When I was very young, I used to write stories and listen to music. I used to put my head between the speakers and put a record on again and again. And it was, I remember the two records. It was great war themes, so it was the soundtracks of war films, and the other one was great Western themes, so it was the soundtrack to Western films. So I think that had some impact. And then I stopped being interested at all, and I sort of got interested in music and girls. And then when I was at university, there was a drama society that I got involved in, and I had a friend who wrote a play, which we then took to the Edinburgh Festival. And then he said to me, "Let's write one together." So that was how it started for me. And I think I've been in a band, a music band. That's what I'd really wanted to do. And I think theatre felt like a sort of, and it hadn't worked out. So theatre felt like a sort of consolation prize, because it was a small group of you developing something together, which you then perform in front of an audience. And then film felt like a kind of slightly more abstract version of that. So it's been a gradual stepping away from being a pop star. From failing to be a pop star, is the truth. Yeah. And what it's brought to my life, I still cannot. I remember when I very first started, thinking, all right, I'm going to give myself 2 years, and if I can get a radio play on BBC Radio 4, the afternoon play, then I'm going to stick with this. That was the goal. And I still can't, and that would have been enough, to have been able to do the odd radio play. It really would have been. I still cannot believe how fortunate I've been, because I get to do what I love and would be doing anyway. I get to do it for a living, so it's incredible.
I'm sometimes asked about what advice I would have for a writer, a young writer, and my advice is always, don't do it unless there's nothing else you can do. If you have to do it, then fine. But actually, there are much less painful ways of spending your life. even after all these years, it's still very, very difficult, very challenging, and very effortful. It doesn't come easy, and of course, when I was a child, I wanted to be a writer in an abstract kind of way, and I said to my father I wanted to be a writer, and he was very kind about it because he didn't think that it was possible, but he said, okay, fine, then just write. So I started writing plays, I guess, when I was about 8, and it never occurred to me that to do anything else, and I don't think I'm capable of doing anything else. I don't think I could do anything else. So I have no choice. Within that, I've had a lot of pleasure and a lot of pain. But you know, I'm not sorry I did it. Not that there was any alternative. But it is actually a very, looking back on it, a very rewarding profession, in the sense of leaving you feeling, well, I've done what I wanted to do. I've written what I wanted to write. I've never done anything that I didn't want to do. And if you can get through your life, if you can get through 50 years and it works, then you're, as Peter said, you're very, very lucky. And so I'm happy that unlike the rest of my family who never read a book in their lives, that somebody reached out and said, you're the writer.
We would be able to spend the whole night with you guys talking about writing. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing with the colleagues.